Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplanty Goodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see around me and in front of me. It's tropical houseplants. So today I want to talk about the plant that you might be able to see in front of me, and for some people that have got this in the collection, they might be swearing at their screen right now, because this is the Alocasia amazonica poly, or at least that's where I keep seeing the name come up. Some people might say that it's the Alocasia amazonica, some people might say it's the Alocasia poly, some people I've seen it called the amazonica poly as well. So take from it what you will. Let's talk a bit more about this plant, however. So, like I'm sure you've seen in some other videos, this is a plant that was made, it was hybridized by humans. I'm not entirely sure what the cross was in order to create this, and I'm not even sure if that's been released, because a lot of the times if a plant has been crossed in the trade, there's usually not an awful lot of information of what the cross might be. There might be some good guesses. If I can find online what people assume that this has been crossed with, or even if it's been confirmed, I'll add it somewhere on the video and you might be able to see what the cross of the two different alocasias was. But the reason why I'm saying that this is a plant that might get a few people's hackles up is because this tends to be a relatively easy alocasia to find in most stores, at least in my location, so in the UK, and I would assume Europe is probably the same as well. It's definitely got a very interesting leaf look to it. It's not velvety in the touch, it's kind of leathery, relatively kind of stiff, not particularly stiff, but relatively kind of durable leaves, let's just call it that way. Probably more so than some other alocasias, which might have some thinner leaves. Not so much like the jewel alocasias. The jewel alocasias tend to have slightly harder leaves. I'm thinking of, for instance, the Alocasia black velvet. That's got slightly harder leaves. The same thing with the dragon scales and everything like that. But this has definitely got a bit of a leathery feel to it, like most alocasias, and I will say this is probably the alocasia that does this the most. It is a spider mite magnet, absolute spider mite magnet, and you can see that you might have seen this in some of my other videos. These are satchels of predatory mites, and they are predatory spider mite mites, essentially. So they're a different type of mite that will eat the spider mites. So good mites. We like these types of mites. We don't like the spider mites. I know, so one of the people that I've always followed on YouTube, which is Plants, Pots and Whatnots. And if you haven't discovered the channel, by all means, please go and give her all the love that you can, because just awesome human being, great collection. I can't say any more than that, really. But she has actually had some challenges recently because she used some of the predatory mites, and she was saying that she got even more mites. I don't know if that's a batch issue or there's a specific retailer in Canada where she's based, and that it might be a bit of an issue here. I've not had that problem in the UK, and I've not had that problem with the spider mite predatory company that I use over here, which is Dragonfly, if I'm not mistaken. So I've been really lucky when it comes to that. The other thing that you might notice on this plant, and hopefully if I move this leaf, you might be able to see it there. Probably, let me see if I can bring it in a bit closer so you might be able to see it a bit more. I don't know if you can see that orange blob that's happening there. That is actually seeds of the alocasia. And I haven't pollinated it, so I'm not entirely sure if that is fertile seeds or not. And that is another point I want to say. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 spent flower pods, essentially, is what they turn into after the bloom is spent. It doesn't smell particularly, as far as I can tell you. And generally speaking, in terms of care for this plant, if you want more foliage, and this goes with most plants, to be fair, chop off the blooms, especially if it's not anything that you necessarily want to see over and over and over again. And that will release some energy back into the plant to then push out more foliage rather than more blooms. So that's something to bear in mind. But as I said, Spider mites are probably going to be a biggest issue over here with this one. This is also one that some people struggle to keep happy with. And in my experience, through growing a lot of alocasia for a long period of time, this might be the first alocasia that people buy. And again, this is just my opinion, I don't think this is the best one to maybe start off with. It's not as straightforward as you might believe based on how readily available and how cheap it is in the market. But take that how you will, essentially. But in my experience with this one, it's the same as most alocasias. It likes to get watered just before the soil goes dry. A moisture meter will be your friend in this one. I don't know whether or not you've noticed when I picked this up earlier on, I have since transferred this specific alocasia into pond rather than soil. I know alocasia generally do quite well in leca. I've tried leca, it wasn't for me. Pond I am really enjoying at the moment, so I'll choose a pond. And this one is doing quite well. And actually, unlike a lot of my other alocasia in pond, I do let this dry out a bit more before I water it. It's not in a water reservoir. I'm just watering it the same way that I would have done if it was within soil rather than pond. And it seems to be loving life, which is good. And generally speaking, I'm not surprised. Most of the alocasia that I've moved over to pond are doing really, really well. Now, humidity. With this one, I've tended to have it in household humidity a lot of times above radiators, which probably agitates the spider mite issue a bit more because I tend to get more spider mites in the winter than I do in the summer because of the heat, the dry heat from the radiators, and there's less humidity. But so far, the interesting thing that has happened, and this is only based on a few months of experience with this plant, is since I've moved it into leca, I've had less issues, not leca, pond, I've had less issues with spider mites. To be entirely frank, I have not had any spider mites since moving it in. And I was fully expecting the moment that it moved into a drier medium that it would have that issue. But it's doing really, really well. With most alocasia, same thing goes with this one. If you don't get the watering just right, and I'm really sorry to tell you this, but it's going to be a bit of a trial and error until you get it right for your plant in your environment, of getting that watering, of watering it just before it goes fully dry, you will see this plant sacrifice the oldest leaf for a new leaf to emerge. And it kind of makes sense. The problem that happens then is that if you started with an alocasia with 3 leaves, and that happens, and you get a new leaf and you lose an old leaf, you still got an alocasia with 3 leaves. You don't have an alocasia with 4 leaves. And because of the way that it grows out of a central corm, that could be a challenge for some people. But just getting the watering just right is going to be one of those things that's really going to help you with this plant. In terms of fertilizing, the same thing that I do with most of my other plants. Once every 2nd or 3rd watering, I will properly fertilize this plant, even in the winter, because I've always got this in a south-facing window. I think I've said this previously as well, with most of my alocasia, maybe not the dual alocasia, with most of my alocasia, I almost give them south-facing, bright light, almost to the same level as a cactus. If I can give them a bit more shade, then I will prefer that. But they generally tend to do a bit better than that. I think the moment that I move them into slightly lower light, or maybe just a bright indirect light, is the moment that I start having my alocasia struggle. Again, that's just been my experience. And obviously I'm in the northern hemisphere, so obviously south-facing window gets the brightest light. If you're in the southern hemisphere, then that's going to be the opposite for you, essentially. But overall, after a while, you will get the hang of this, and it does eventually become one of your easier alocasia to take care of, but there's going to be a bit of trial and error. Don't get disheartened if this is the first alocasia you've got and it didn't do well. Try with some other alocasias. I would almost say, I'm trying to think now of another one. For me, at least, one of the easier alocasias that I found were both the Alocasia zebrina. That was easier than this. And also the Alocasia, I want to say Gaggiana, but the Alocasia Gaggiana variegata is the other big leaf alocasia that I have. I think it's the Alocasia macrorhiza with just the big traditional green elephant ear leaves. And I know both the zebrina and the macrorhiza are quite in your face, and they can get quite large and kind of small tree size when you get the care just right. So bear that in mind. This will stay a bit more compact. But yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say about this one. What have your experiences been with growing this type of alocasia? Have you struggled? Have you had some successes? What have you done maybe differently to what I do? Do drop it in the comments down below. I'd love to have that conversation. I'm sure other people would like to know kind of other success stories or even some failure stories. And yeah, as I said previously, I'll say it again, don't get disheartened if this is one that you don't do particularly well with. As I said, in my experience, I don't truly think that this is a true beginner alocasia. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.